Hello, I'm Robert Egby, and we're talking British amateur movies of another age. Permit me to go back a stretch, 72 years in fact, to 1949. The war had been over for 4 years, food rationing was still very much alive, and things in England were still very low-key. In Maidenhead, which is 27 miles west of London, which is now part of the Royal Borough of Maidenhead and Windsor, a group of creative teenagers got together and formed an amateur movie production club. We called it Stirling Films. And the first production was Eerie Acres, a 30-minute caper that now seems lost in history. Perhaps one day someone will find it, who knows. A local newspaper took this picture. It was our first day of filming in 1949. Yes, it was staged. The picture was published and the national media in Fleet Street caught on, and it was big time for quite a while. For the record, it's left to right, Luke Over, Brian Cross, John Stevens, Ken Hallett, that's me with the exposure meter, Donald Over and David Warren, and the fellow on his knees with the camera was Graham Scrivener. On September the 14th, 1949, the 28-minute Eerie Acres had its premiere in the pavilion adjoining the Stag and Hounds public house at Pinckney's Green, Maidenhead. The place was packed. David Hand, who had been technical director for Disney Classics Bambi and now had his own animation studios, came, plus a crew from the Moore Hall Studios. They turned up and applauded heartily. A surprise visitor was movie producer William McQuitty, accompanied by stars Pauline Bentley and Emery's Jones, and McQuitty became noted for his production of A Night to Remember, which recreated the Titanic disaster. Amateur movies were all the rage back then, and for several years in Maidenhead. And then, as time passed, teenagers became adults, grew up, and moved on in their own lives and in their own ways. After 13 years of covering the Middle East with news photography and videos, or not videos in those days, just 16mm work, in late 1963 I returned to my hometown, and just before Christmas, Luke Over and Jim Franklin came over and we decided to make another silent movie called Roll Call. Just for the thrill of it. In one evening we hammered out a script in the old flywheel tradition, slapstick. As amateur fiction movies go, I don't think Roll Call measures up to our past productions at Stirling Films Amateur Movie Club, particularly Eerie Acres. Eerie Acres was shot on a 9.5mm film, a great film stock with a sprocket hole in the middle between frames. Try describing that to somebody and they think you're nuts. It was almost twice the picture size of an 8mm stock. Well, January 1964 was 15 years since Stirling Films and Eerie Acres first started shooting, and time was limited. We had just 3 weekends to film the script. Well, in reality, 3 Sundays. Remember, this was England. The first Sunday was cloudy. The second Sunday was snowing, quite heavily, and the third Sunday was foggy. That's the sort of weather that would drive a professional continuity secretary raving mad. For instance, as the villain, I went through a hedge where it was nice but cloudy one side and heavy snow falling on the other. As it happened, it was a nutty film and anything went, as you will see. One of the unusual effects used in Roll Call I had picked up from the guys at Moore Hall Studios in Cookham, where I worked as a messenger. If you hold the 9.5mm camera upside down to shoot the film, shoot the action, then turn the film around to project the pictures, you get action in reverse. It happens during the chase in this movie. I cannot imagine doing it in this day and age using a digital video camera. It probably can be done with some know-how. The cast was extensive. Luke Over played the detective as usual, and Jim Franklin, who on the credits is listed as James Byford, played his sidekick. Maureen Anderson, who plays the scientist's daughter, in real life was Maureen Over. Then playing the parts were Donald Over, Bernard Clark, Brian Wilson and John Crowhurst, who played the scientist. Jim Franklin, who was skilled at movie production. Why not? He worked at the BBC television in London, and so he did the editing and audio. The whole thing runs 9.5 minutes. Thinking back, it was too big a project for two things: insufficient time for shooting and cash, dinero. Christmas in England was and is expensive, and I ran out with 16mm lab processing costs. Yes, we shot it on a simple camera. One lens, 16mm Keystone camera that I'd used for newsreel stuff in Aden, now part of Yemen. Jim Franklin, bless his fine work, completed the movie with voiceover. Now here's the thing. Jim entered the movie into the Slough Arts Festival 1964. It won first prize in the 16mm movie competition. Well, Roll Call, like another movie we did in Cologne, Germany later that year, Snap Decision, yes, it's on YouTube, sat in a can for some 57 years until this past summer when I asked Roy Kasuba of Trenton, New Jersey, to convert it to MP4 high definition for YouTube. And as you'll see, Roy did a fine job. So here, now, from January 1964, is the Stirling Films amateur movie production, Roll Call. Enjoy.
You may be wondering about the somewhat obscure qualities of the picture you are now watching. It has a veiled secrecy about it, a deep darkness that makes you feel uncertain. You are wondering if in fact you are watching a film at all. You can't believe you'd be shown a film with no pictures, and yet it's a fact. But you still don't believe it. You're uncertain. Uncertainty leads to curiosity, and we all know what that did to the cat. Curiosity on an international scale is known as espionage. Now we know you're not spies and you might not be cosmopolitan, but you're curious. And that's exactly how a Russian spy was feeling some months ago in England. He was curious, and that was his undoing. The aforementioned spy was christened with an obscure and unpronounceable Russian name, but in England called himself Dr. Kristin Kraut. Poor chap. His task was to secure certain scientific documents from an underpaid British scientist. This was despicable. Crout had been watching the scientist for some weeks. The British scientist, who must remain anonymous, had been engaged in delicate research. Together with his daughter, he was about to launch a new discovery that would bring comfort to a nation. Crout ordered his men to act, a feat which ruled them out of this year's Academy Award hopes. The anonymous scientist's anonymous daughter was completely taken aback into the nearest telephone box, where she hastily summoned the services of Britain's #1 secret agent, who arrived on the scene of the crime before she'd even been able to tell him where it was. The British agent had no number, so he used his name. He was known to all and sundry, mostly to sundry, as Wolf J. Flywheel, and was about as ineffective as Shakespeare would have been without a quill. But he was as keen as his assistant was sleepy. His assistant, Sidney, was in fact a trainee bus driver for the Ministry of Pensions, but was at that time on loan to the Foreign Office. The anonymous daughter flooded in freezing brine, then gave the British agents their first clue. "My poor father's been kidnapped," she said. "Never mind," said Flywheel. "All one has to do is keep one's head." Away went the spy-catchers. The hunt was on. But soon poor Sidney was overtaken with a bout of travel sickness, and so they had to stop, about 20 yards from the crook's hideout. They've always said fact was stranger than fiction. The art of good counter-espionage is not to let the spy you're spying on spy on you before you've had a good spy on him. Spies are unpleasant things, and so are spied-on counter-spies. Too late, they've gone on a crook's tour. Kristin Crout, the crafty Cossack, was on his way to the post office with those stolen British documents. Kraut was off into a passing snowstorm that was brewing up at that very moment. Like I said, the snowstorm was only passing. And so it was. Flywheel and Sydney returned those secret documents to the anonymous scientist and his anonymous daughter. But somehow they didn't seem very concerned. And as Sydney had said before, that parcel did seem to be rather an odd shape for a scientific document. It's all very well to laugh, thought Flywheel, but we've chased a Russian spy for 12.5 miles through 3 seasons, and all we've got is 2 rolls of best Bronco to show for it. It's disgusting, said Sydney. But that is not quite the end of our story. Flywheel and Sydney thought they'd play a little joke on the Kremlin and post those toilet rolls back to Russia with love. But you can write on toilet paper in invisible ink. And so we say farewell to some more British secrets and another British amateur film. Good night.